We know the Disney name as a monolith. It represents a global entertainment empire, synonymous with magic, massive theme parks, and cultural dominance. But the foundation of this multi-billion-dollar entity was built in a state of utter desperation. Long before the theme parks, Walt Disney was a young artist from rural Missouri. He possessed massive creative ambitions, but he was working without any significant financial resources. Understanding the risk-taking DNA of the modern company requires looking at the failure that nearly ended his career before it began. In May 1922, he launched Laugh-O-Gram Films in Kansas City. The startup had a fragile initial capitalization of just $15,000. The business model had a structural flaw. Animation production costs were steep and immediate, while revenues only arrived after a project was fully completed and delivered. By the summer of 1923, the company was collapsing. Things became so desperate that Disney actually missed a meeting with a potential client because he didn't own a decent pair of shoes. This is the surviving chattel mortgage from the bankruptcy. It legally documents the transfer of the company's remaining property to a creditor. Scrolling down reveals the exact tools stripped from the studio: typewriters, a movie camera, and their drawing desks. With his equipment gone and his name on a bankruptcy filing, the worst-case scenario had already happened. The total loss of Laugh-O-Gram meant that in future ventures, the fear of falling was gone. He had already hit the floor. In August 1923, he packed up and left Kansas City for California, arriving with empty pockets but a clean slate. Mickey Mouse emerged from this desperation. The character was a practical tool created to keep a failing studio operational after a series of Hollywood setbacks. In 1928, gambling on Cinephone meant perfectly matching a film reel's frame rate to an audio waveform. After the first attempt drained his funds, he sold his personal Moon Roadster, pouring the cash directly into the final mix. That second attempt became Steamboat Willie. Its success proved that betting on expensive, bleeding-edge technology could provide a massive competitive advantage. A decade later, he took another massive risk, staking the studio's entire capital on producing the first full-length animated feature, Snow White. The industry mocked the decision, labeling the expensive production Disney's folly. Instead, the film broke box office records. The characters spilled out of the theaters and into the real world, leaving a permanent cultural footprint. He soon decided that two-dimensional screen was too limiting. He chose to leverage his newly acquired wealth to build a physical, immersive world for families to step inside those stories. Despite warnings against the massive capital expenditure, he pushed forward with the engineering and construction effort required to build Disneyland. The park's opening transformed the company from an animation house into an institution that could generate revenue from movies, merchandise, and tourism simultaneously. Walt Disney's death in 1966 sent a shockwave through the industry. Competitors assumed the operation would struggle to survive without its founder. However, the studio maintained the appetite for risk-taking that Disney had established during the company's early years. Decades later, the leadership executed a series of massive acquisitions. They purchased Pixar and Marvel Entertainment, capturing dominance over the modern box office. That strategy continued with the purchases of Lucasfilm and 21st Century Fox, bringing the most popular franchises in history under a single corporate umbrella. These acquisitions reflect a company culture that remains comfortable with massive, high-stakes bets, a legacy of the era when risking everything was the only way to stay in business. Today, the Walt Disney Company commands a market valuation in the hundreds of billions. It is a scale that was unimaginable during the summer of 1923. Back then, there was no empire. There was only a stack of unpaid bills and a legal document confirming a total operational failure. It is a long journey from the loss of a few typewriters and a desk to the ownership of the world's most valuable intellectual property. But that 1923 collapse provided an early lesson in resilience. It forced the studio to learn how to execute under extreme pressure. The resilience forged in that first failure became the critical foundation for the next entire century of expansion. The Disney Company as we know it began with a man who viewed a complete financial collapse as an opportunity to start over.